Hello everybody, and welcome to another Forgotten Empires weekly Twitch TV livestream on twitch.tv/Forgotten Empires. You can find the VODs to this on either my personal YouTube page or the YouTube page for Forgotten Empires, and you can find all the links that you need to that stuff on the screen or in the video description below. For those of you who are not aware, Forgotten Empires is the game development team behind the brand new expansions to Age of Empires 2 HD Edition on Steam. My name is Resonance22, and I'm proud to be the community manager for that company. Today, we'll be doing the usual viewer games, and I'll be answering your questions from the Twitch chat. I'm always reading your guys' feedback, and I'm looking forward to just continually using it to improve the state of the game. Of course, though, when it comes to future content or feature requests, I have to give vague answers because we can't afford to make promises for things that might not actually happen, but that doesn't mean we're not working on it. So in general, the best questions to ask me are on things that we've already announced or on things we've already done. And without further ado, let's jump straight into this game. So this is going to be a... don't forget to pause the stream too. Yeah, it's King of the Hill. You win if you have the center hill at the end of the game. Focus on the center hill at 100 years remaining. GLHF. So, this is going to be a King of the Hill free-for-all game, so these players will not be able to... so basically only one player will be able to win, and it's the player that holds the center hill when the timer hits 0. Players will be able to form alliances with each other, but only one player can win. So expect to see all sorts of backstabbing and diplomacy shenanigans as this game drags on. We are going to start by briefly taking a moment to introduce the players. So we have Apollo Portuguese Knight playing as the Grey Koreans, not the Portuguese. And we have Xgear playing as the Blue Portuguese, Haru playing as the Yellow Aztecs, Atlantis SK playing as the Teal Saracens, You Shall Not Pass playing as the Red Vikings, Galley Ray Jepsen playing as the Purple Teutons, and Heisenberg playing as the Orange Malians. Welcome to the live stream, everybody. We hope you've been enjoying it so far, and we're looking forward to continue doing this in the future. Find the live streaming schedule by following our page on Twitch and giving that a look. So, Terra95, to answer your question earlier, so the streams that I do here and any content that I do for Forgotten Empires, welcome to stream by the way, this is Waxon, and Johnny Jellyfish, is in addition to the content that I do for my personal YouTube and Twitch pages. So this is not a replacement for, it's just extra stuff for the official Age of Empires community. Zero Empires is not formally on the Forgotten Empires team, but he has helped us with past projects, for example. Things like the African Kingdoms trailer that we had was done by him, and just he did a very, very good job on that. So yes. If you guys have any questions on development and whatnot, feel free to let me know. I might not be able to answer all of them, but I will do my best. Today's map is going to be Steppe, which means that players start without a town center, so they're going to spawn along the edges of the map, and then that's where all of the trees are. The trees are near the corners, as we can see here, and then the middle of the map is our monument. And as soon as a player has a unit adjacent to this, a timer will start ticking down in the top right, and when that timer hits 0, the player that holds control of it wins the game. How do you switch control of the monument? You must remove all units that the player has adjacent to it that has control of the monument. So if I have like 4 villagers here and all of them die, then it will switch control over to the person who has units there. These free-for-all King of the Hill games are always really entertaining because players need to make allies in the early game if they want to survive, but they have to backstab them at the last minute, preferably once the timer hits fewer than 100 years if they actually want to win. JFK today asks again, since the previous game crashed, about whether or not we were going to add something like a infinite farm reseed button. So again, those are the types of things where if there's enough community demand for it, then I will forward it to Skybox and whatnot, and I'll talk to the other Forgotten Empires devs about it and see what they think. But something that we have to consider with something like an infinite farm reseeding thing is it's less likely that we do that compared to the ability to queue up fish traps like you would with farms. That's something that is on our luxury feature list, which is because right now the priority with development for Age of Empires 2 is on smoothing out the existing experience, making sure that we have as few bugs and stability issues as possible, the game runs nicely, all the existing features work as intended, and then we will have more design space for new features to plan them out and test them once everything is all smoothed out. And the ability to infinitely reseed farms compared to something like the ability to queue up fish traps. Queuing up fish traps is something that already has a precedent in the existing code base, so it's easier for Skybox engineers to make sure that a feature like that actually works as intended, whereas having farms reseed themselves is something that is not easily done in the code, so it carries a little bit more of a risk with it. And also, we feel that players may end up accidentally, really draining all the wood out of their economy completely unintentionally because they're not used to the feature. It's much easier to gauge the impact of how much wood you're going to lose when you queue up the farms in advance rather than having them queue up automatically. That being said, it's something that we certainly could do in the future, but it would be a little lower on the priority list. It's something that we would more likely see something like the ability to queue up fish traps to be reseeded. And that's something that we would love to do. So, hopefully that makes sense. Unfortunately, Ramsey, I've seen players with very low elo, but oftentimes it's not done organically. You know, they'll just leave a bunch of games for novelty reasons. Yeah, Steppe is a very cool map, one that I definitely enjoy. So in terms of actual strategy in this game, the thing that you usually want to do early on in these free-for-all diplomacy games is, again, locate your geographically adjacent allies and probably form an alliance with them. Generally speaking, you don't want to get bullied out of the game immediately because your two adjacent players are actually hostile to you and they just kill you. So that's something you certainly want to avoid. And then, you know, once maybe one of your teammates has definitive control of the middle, when the timer hits about 100 years remaining, you want to make sure that you have sufficient units there to, quote, protect him, and then, turn the tables and wipe out his army, and then seize that from him. And then hopefully he won't be able to take it back from you, and then they win the game. I do think, though, that players are often a little bit too hesitant to actually do any sort of attacking in the early game on maps, on any of these free-for-all King of the Hill games. While you don't want to certainly go all in and ignore the center, because that's how you guarantee to lose the game, I think that doing some raiding with mobile units like knights is certainly an excellent idea. Things like scouts, maybe cavalry archers if you're a Civ with a bonus for it. I'll stream game, video, and Spurlone. The Jedi Kigo asks, how about we play a Regicide Fortress game where we're only allowed to make unique units? It might give some insight on how some of the more obscure unique units like the War Wagon and Tarkin are rebalanced in the expansions. That's certainly an interesting idea. I feel like, though, that takes away from a big point of strategy from Age of Empires 2, which is just, how you know when you're supposed to make specific units. Which I suppose is a great tangent for me to... Source Rex says, that's always wrong, always attack your neighbors, leads the most fun. Hey, if you're confident in it, then it can pay off. It's not the same as CBA, of course, by the way, if we limit them to only making unique units, but that might take away from... maybe if we limit them to only unique units for the first, 30, 40 minutes of the game, that would be interesting. But maybe not for the whole game. Because what makes Age of Empires so interesting to us, one of the many things, is that you just can... it's knowing when you need to make units. There's so many different units in Age of Empires 2. And it's that decision-making that really separates the good from the great players. Speaking of that, I think this is an excellent segue into talking a little bit about our balance philosophy for Age of Empires 2. So what is the driving force behind all the changes that we do? Our goal here is to make sure that there are a wider variety of viable strategies and civilizations in the metagame. We want to foster diversity. That's going to be the Forgotten Empire's live stream word of the day. We're trying to open up strategic diversity. Isn't that a meaty phrase? So what does that mean? We would prefer that compared to 1.0c Age of Empires 2, that there are just more options for players. On water maps, we want to see more civs than just the Vikings. On land, we want to see more than just like the Huns, Mayans, Aztecs, and Mongols. In 1v1s at least. We really want to open up the rest of the game to everybody and make sure all the civilizations and strategies are at a relatively closer power level. There are a lot of great examples of us doing this, but it's also worth noting that we don't want to end up in a world where, for example, civilizations that players are very attached to, like the Huns, for example, are just not viable anymore. We want to make sure that players are able to still go for the strategies and play their civilizations that they grew up with and that they love and that they've been practicing for years, but that they also have just more options at their disposal. So that doesn't mean taking away options by nerfing civilizations into oblivion. Some examples of our balanced choices have been with things like we reduce the cost of the Cavalry Archer gold by 10. So it's 40 wood and 70 gold originally. We have dropped that by 5 twice now for a grand total of 10, down to 40 wood and 60 gold. And to compensate for that, we have made some slight adjustments to the Hun's Cavalry Archer discount, so that now that the Cavalry Archers themselves are cheaper, it doesn't mean that the Huns got buffed. The Hun's Cavalry Archer, at least in the Imperial Age, is approximately the same price as it was before, but what we're doing with a change like that is we're not trying to nerf the Huns. It's slightly more expensive in the Castle Age, but it's really not that much. In the Imperial Age, it's the same. What we're doing is we're trying to make sure the Huns stay at roughly the same power level, but more civilizations have the option of going for cavalry archers. So I think that that's a good example of our design philosophy. Also, with all the changes that we made to water balance, adding the demolition raft and the fire galley, we're again just to open up a wider variety of strategies on the water, more gameplay, and also more civilizations. Like we've seen the Byzantines actually seeing a reasonable amount of water play and competitive because of their very strong fire ships, and now that fire ships are stronger and that they have access to fire galleys, it can be quite nice. Still, though, we found that we overshot the balance a little bit on the fire galley initially. So in the most recent set of updates, we did nerf that a little bit. And the goal is that we want all 3 ships to be usable in the water. We want you to be able to go for galleys if you like dock at the back and you mass them up, but we want fire galleys to be the type of thing where if you end up like docking at the front and you're close to your opponent, that fire galleys are very good versus a small amount of massed galleys. These have been Cision's general design goals. And that like demolition rafts would be a good way to not only come back on the water, but also to deal with mass fire galleys. And we really feel like water balance right now is in actually a great spot, and we really encourage players to keep an open mind and experiment with those type of things. You should not pass, actually try to palisade wall this off, put down some watchtowers. So I feel like this is a very bad idea, mostly because it's a quite a large resource investment and a ton of villager idle time. These 2 watchtowers, the game's not going to end in the feudal age. It just can't, based off how the timer starts at 550 years. The game is almost always going to go to the Imperial Age, at the very earliest, maybe late Castle Age. But we can assume it's going to the Imperial Age. And once we're in the Castle Age and battering rams start coming out, then these palisade walls will not last, these watchtowers will not last, and it's just going to be a big waste of resources. So, going to have to keep our eyes peeled and see how that pays off for him. Heisenberg, our Malians player, on his way to the Castle Age. So this is good. I feel like his town center is a little bit too far away from the wood line, but these guys haven't really played this map that much. I'm going to check out X Deer over here, see how he's doing. Should be able to sneak up to the Castle Age relatively soon. So let me, I might miss a couple of people's questions in the chat, of course. You're welcome to ask them again in a couple of minutes, if need be. McKay says Rez is cute, and you meant to say red. Sperlum says, well, Vikings Tech team games are no longer viable in water anymore. If you play 3v3, you go longboats, but that's it, because allies need you to buy time for that. Vikings really need to rework on water in the DLC. My suggestion is to give them fire galley in the feudal age, no castle or imperial age tech of it, just the feudal one. So again, we always really encourage players to keep an open mind with balance, especially if you're looking at something like the escape tournaments as a metric for that, at least like pick ban win-loss statistics. Because the escape gaming tournaments are not an overall... They're not a good indicator of the state of the overall metagame due to their bizarre settings. The bans, limited civ pool, the map pools, a lot of the players are still learning the new civilizations. We do think that there's a lot to be learned from watching the individual games themselves, but the overall statistics as a whole, we are hesitant to draw too many conclusions from. They can be a good indicator of... They can kind of point you in the right direction, but they're not the end-all be-all, basically. And with the state of water balance, the general consensus is with pro players is that water balance is absolutely not solved right now. It's really just open in the air. So we really want to make sure that players are always keeping an open mind, that they don't feel like they are ever locking themselves out of experimenting because they think that they've already got the water metagame solved. Because we'll find that a lot of the time, as the pro players explain, that what ships are viable and what civs are viable is heavily dependent on the map generation, the civilization matchup, as well as just your spawn, like how close you are to your opponent. So, on maps where galleys are strong, the Vikings, we do believe, are quite good on water. And we did, of course, make some significant steps to, really smoothing out that balance. It's something that we're continually monitoring. So if it so turns out that the Vikings are still weak, we'd be more than happy to tweak them, of course. It's just that with the nerfs to the fire galley, Pierce are really dropping it down. We find that the Vikings are definitely viable on some water maps, especially where the galleys are actually useful. We saw in the 2v2 tournament that the Vikings actually did see quite a bit of play, and even though we don't look at pick ban statistics that much, we do look at the games themselves, and the Vikings had plenty of games where they were actually effective making galleys in the early game. We feel like the lack of fire galleys is something that makes that civilization unique, but I do agree with you, though, that it probably wouldn't hurt to give them fire galleys, and I think that it's the type of thing where if it so turns out that the Vikings really do need it, like that's something that I would be in 100% support of. Similarly, like when we get the Aztecs demolition rafts, I really don't think it would hurt them, especially because, like you said, not giving them access to the fire ship and fast fire ship, I think really balances it out. So we're always monitoring water balance, always, 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 and I would not be surprised if the Vikings received the fire galley in a future patch. Would not be surprised. It's something that we're always considering, so it could happen. Okay, let's see. Missed a message from Game Video. Said, so you need to tag at Resons22 if you want me to see that. He says, did you know the Ethiopians benefit of their plus 100 food, plus 100 gold in the feudal, castle age, imperial age starts? Having 400 food and 300 gold is pretty sick, but everyone else starts at 200 and 100. So I did not know that, but that sounds like it's working as intended, thankfully. Otherwise, that bonus would be something where we would need to fix it to work like that. I feel like that's working as intended, so yeah, that's absolutely intended behavior. It would be something I would consider it a problem if it didn't work the other way. So again, yeah, with water balance, completely agree with you. I'm just hesitant to feel too strongly about the Vikings right now, because we really feel like, as you mentioned, that once you hit the castle age, the fact that there's no longer a requirement to build longboats, that you don't need to build a castle, and the longboats got the discount, I believe, like 10 wood and 10 gold. That's huge. The longboat is just an excellent comeback mechanic, even in a 1v1 on water. So water balance is not figured out yet, but as time goes on, if we need to give the fire galley to the Vikings, or we need to give them fast fire ships with plus 100 HP, we'll do it. Whatever it takes to have a more balanced, more viable Aoe2 metagame. I always have to play devil's advocate with this kind of stuff, explaining a little bit what our thought process is. Because balance is complicated. There is, generally speaking, never a right or a wrong answer. Although I would say that one could argue that perhaps it would be a bad idea to add fast fire ships with plus 100 HP, and I would concede that that's something that we probably wouldn't do. Whatever leads to a more well-balanced, varied metagame. Oh man, so I've been answering questions about balance, and I really feel like I'm looking at something really interesting here. So Xgear, what are you up to, my friend? He's up to no good at all. So our Portuguese player, is he allied with the gray mobile? Yes, he is. What about the orange mobile? The answer is yes. So he wants to build a wall, make Age of Empires 2 great again. I feel like this is a huge waste of stone, because here's the thing. And this is something that a lot of players who are newer to Age of Empires don't get right away. And this is something that was difficult for me to learn when I was just starting out, is that walls are not a way to stop an attack from getting to you. They are a way to warn you, to give you time to react to an attack. It's to take that element of surprise, give you the ability to prepare. And that's huge. Oftentimes in Age of Empires 2, this is a game of constant momentum swings, as players are trying their best to get the one-up on their opponent, mix in that top secret counter or something like that, go for that landing that your opponent is just not ready for, catch them off guard before they're able to respond to it. And walls give you that crucial time you need to respond. That being said, when you're investing in a wall like this, which inevitably you're never really going to be able to get it all the way across the map, by the time you finish the whole wall, it costs you so much stone, and we'll probably be in the Imperial Age or late Castle Age where battering rams, petards, and trebuchets will be able to remove this with ease, unless you double or triple layer it, but then we're talking a stone investment in the several hundreds, which we would rather oftentimes have a castle in our economy as a means to just protect it from raids. That way we don't have to pull back our own military units in the later stages of the game to defend ourselves. Iceberg dropping some castles, and this is once again why we're seeing that you shall not pass this approach. I really love that he's focusing on the middle. This is great. I more often than not see players neglecting the middle entirely, and they just lose because they forget they're playing King of the Hill. This man remembered the game mode, so he's already my favorite player. That being said, this is going to have minimal impact, because again, now that he has the watchtowers up, he's got the wall up, he can't deal with these castles. It's just going to get removed immediately. Hopefully that makes sense. On the stream, Sinistro Jr., great to see ya. So, every player in the castle age, great to see them not neglecting that. Another castle being dropped here by Haru. Hopefully that is a reference to the Futurama Richard Nixon, but I have no idea. He's got a good Republican body. He will be dropping his castle right about now. He is the Aztecs. Got a monk here for good measure, presumably to capture some relics. See if we can confirm that in his own base. Nope, I guess he just has some monks mixed in his army. Perhaps this is a deterrent to knights, which is a huge value swing, of course, if you're able to convert all those. Ready Teddy says, Steppe has a rate of criminal activity like never before, and the increase was huge. The media won't tell you, but it changed bigly. Steppe, can you believe it? We gotta build that wall, folks. Trust me. Oh me, oh my. Well, the stream Scout Goat, he says, speaking of Vikings, shouldn't Berserks be renamed as Berserkers already? So that's something I actually can't answer. That would be great if we had some of the, more of the initial Civilization design team here, all of the history experts. Because, of course, even though Age of Empires 2 is a game that is not entirely historically accurate, it is based in history, so perhaps there's a reason why they're called Berserks and not Berserkers. I always thought they were Berserkers when I was a kid, so I don't know why that is the case, but I'm sure some of the initial Civilization design / campaign team might be able to answer that. Of course, we really, really do value your feedback. You know, I read things like Reddit, the Steam forums, the Forgotten Empires page, personal Facebook, and even though the vast majority of feedback that I get are people's, like, Civilization suggestions, which we really just can't, I just can't take those and just implement them into the game. You know, like I said, right now we don't have plans at present to make another DLC. Never say never, but right now that's not something that we're working on or have any announcements for. So all those Civilization suggestions, we can't just, like, take one that we like and just, like, slap it into the game. More often than not, this is something I can't explain as part of our development process, is that in storage, our initial, like, design team and whatnot have so many Civilization ideas in case a new expansion ever did come out or was approved by Microsoft and they're like, hey, we would like to see another DLC, can you guys do it? We have plenty of Civilization ideas in storage. So even if civs do end up, like, sounding familiar to someone's initial idea, chances are the design team just came up with it independently. And also, there are just so many of those ideas floating around that very few of them are truly unique at this point. Yellow going to turn the tables on Gray, and he's going to start converting this guard tower, converting this mangonel. Gray has not switched to enemy yet, doesn't know that he's getting hoodwinked. And now Yellow moving in here, and we see Red's palisade wall accomplished not too much. But as far as feedback goes, things that are really helpful to us is things like, you know, letting us know about bugs. Skybox Labs, we can't guarantee that they read and see everything on the Steam forums, though we hope they do. And this makes sure that in case they miss one of them by accident, that we're able to, you know, let them know about what the priorities should be, like things that are really negatively affecting the state of the game, bug-wise, and make sure that they're aware of it and that it, like, has the appropriate spot on their priorities list. We can't choose what they do, of course. That's something that they decide on independently, but I can use your feedback to offer my input and hopefully influence that just a bit. So, you know, and I can also, of course, answer, you know, whether or not they're aware of these things or they're, like, on the tracker, but I can't show you the bug tracker. That's private, but I can, you know, check that stuff, file reports. Feature requests as well we have to be very vague with, but those are always helpful to know where the community's, like, priorities lie. We do have a luxury list of potential features that we would like to add. Tired Taylor asks, can you tell anyone of the Civ ideas you have stored away? Oh, so I feel like I have to be careful with that, mostly because if another DLC was ever made, then people would go through these VODs and be like, okay, let's see, which ones did Resonance 22 confirm had been considered? And then they'd be like, aha, you know, we already know what that Civ is going to be like. And it would be very difficult for me to give. Also, if I give a Civ here that we never actually implement, then people would always assume it would be coming. So I feel like I have to be pretty careful with that one. But I felt like I should bring that up because that's the type of thing that I can absolutely talk about, is how does Forgotten Empires do things? And the answer is we're always having these discussions about what kind of civilizations would be a great fit for the game from, like, a history standpoint, a gameplay standpoint, what regions are left untouched. And then if a DLC is ever approved, then sometimes those worm their way into the game, or sometimes they don't. So apparently, The berserk can be a noun and an adjective, so the more you know. I figure that there's a reason why it is that way, of course. In the game itself, Yellow has definitive control of the middle, but he does have to deal with our friend Mr. Orange over here. We switch over to Heisenberg. Will be against Haru. Can he deal with them? That is the question, because right now he's being attacked here. This is one of the downsides we see of players going for like a heavy forward like this, is that you have no defensive infrastructure in your own base. But I guess Orange was just like, well, you know, Resonance 22 did say focus on the middle if you want to win, because that is the way you win. However, there is no wood in the middle of the map. Does he even have a lumber camp? Oh my goodness. I think he does. Oh, he does. It's just, this can be very difficult for him to defend his actual base because he's moved so much of his stuff in the middle. So while I feel like he's established one hell of an effective offensive perimeter, and I love this, like, is this very, very safe with these castles protecting these villagers, he does, I think he's an unfortunate map for this. I mean, totally can't blame him, as he hasn't played this map before. It's going to be quite unfortunate, because now he's not going to have access to safe woodline. Basically, Heisenberg needs some friends. These poor guys are bullying him, like, really hard. You always want to make sure in these like King of the Hill games that you're not like bullying the super weak players, but rather you're fearing the guys with the high score, because those are the ones that likely win. Heisenberg would make a very valuable ally here, and I really feel like these players should be taking advantage of that, cozying up to him, because he has a slim chance of winning the game at this point, but he makes such a valuable asset at helping you out. Okay, ask, how often do you have these discussions? It really depends, but I would say, yeah, it actually really depends. You know, it can be anywhere from like once a week to, you know, most days of the week. It just depends on whether or not we have anything in the pipeline or not. So, yeah, it depends. Pretty solid army students players. Good to see them mixing up their army comp. For example, Yellow has both his crossbowmen and his eagle warriors. Quite nice to see that. Oftentimes I use the colloquial we for things that I either was not necessarily involved with initially, mostly because I'm representing Forgotten Empires when I speak on their behalf. So I'm speaking the view of the company, not the view of myself. Some of the time, unless I'm on my personal channel, then it could be either, depending on the context of it. But I have been involved with with the balance and whatnot and the testing for many, many years. So a lot of these I was involved with, but for the initial things. Like the initial design of the FE civilizations, then some of those I was not. It is, of course, an absolute honor, though, to be a part of this. As Age of Empires 2 is still my favorite game of all time. And I continually admire them for actually being able to carry on the legacy, because that's a difficult thing. And that's kind of the driving force between why Forgotten Empires doesn't change things like old civilization architecture, for example, even in situations where we feel like it might be more appropriate based off community feedback. You know, there are a couple ways to look at it. Is like, one, not all the civs are necessarily historically accurate. You know, we take a little bit of liberties there. But also, we want to really preserve the feel of the old civilizations, so we're more hesitant to change their architecture because of that. So we're gonna ask Civ, you'd like to see make its way into future DLC. Again, that's another tough question. I am not, like, I know a reasonable amount of history, but history is not my, like, medieval history is not my strong suit. So I would be more interested in the design side of the civilizations rather than the historical flavor. If I start listing some civilizations I'd like to see historically, again, I feel like people would just be like, those are the ones that are going to be in the game. So I'd say there's more interest in the design side of things. Like when we were working on Rise of the Rajas, I was looking towards things like the Vietnamese, and it's like, okay, well, how do we make their bonuses more flavorful and cool? Opening up, we got a wider variety of strategies, and you know, one of the things I suggested earlier on development was like, okay, well, what if we get the Vietnamese a scaling percentage health-based bonus on all their archer ranges, so like not just archers and not a flat one. And that was one that actually went over really well, and I'm honored that happened to be accepted as the final idea. I think it turned out really nicely. Of course, they don't have hand cannoneers anymore though, because that kind of overlapped a little bit with the Turks. Even though I do think that would be cool. So you know, various things like that. We're always looking towards you know, design space. You know, ask the question: what if we have a unique technology that increases the damage that all cavalry units do to buildings? So those are things that I really like to explore. In terms of history, though, we have so many other members of the Forgotten Empires team that know way more about history and flavor than I do. So I always delegate to them, and I let them do their thing, because they know history. They know what would be really interesting for fans of the game, and that's how I feel like the civilizations that come out always feel like the right choices to me. Yes. Big battle going on in the middle here. Here comes the Teutonic Knights. This is going to be quite a dicey situation for Yellow. He was very close to winning, but he ended up backing off the center of the hill. And now Purple gets to seize it, so well played there. And now Yellow, caught between a rock and a hard place, or a Teutonic Knight and a Malian castle, going to lose almost all of his arbalest. Yes, he will lose all of them. But Purple will not be able to win off this push. This castle also going down, so Haru in a lot of trouble. Here comes Purple with the Teutons cavalry. Great to see the Teutons seeing some excellent play. And here comes Red moving in out of nowhere. Meanwhile, Teal strip mining the map to the best of his abilities. And now Gray getting to the late game. Great to see all these players taking advantage of that. I know Heisenberg was really nervous for this game, man, so my heart goes out to him. I want you guys to be as nice to Heisenberg as possible, because this is not a game mode or a map he's familiar with, and all these streams are, of course, for fun. It's just, if you ever play your own free-for-all King of the Hill games, especially on a map like this, I encourage you, if you do play on Steppe, to make sure that you have some infrastructure near the edges of the map, because that's where all the wood is. Because otherwise, it's really difficult to defend if your entire base is here. I think you want like 4 buildings here, but not like too many for like your actual economy, right? Like you want your economy to be further away from the actual battlefield. 76 years remaining. Can Purple hold on? Here comes some blue onagers. Let's go switch over to Galley Raid Jepsons. Game video, ask what your opinion is of Magyars from balance standpoint. Absolutely, you may. So, as far as the Magyars go, one thing that has been surprising to me recently, on a personal level, is that the general consensus from the community seems to be that the Magyars are a weak civilization. So, why is that? So, general community sentiment, from what I've been reading on the forums and on Reddit and whatnot, is that, and in the private message, of course, I appreciate those of you who are like super polite with that kind of stuff. Thank you. And appreciate the work that we do, because we are reading that. Use the autograph last. So basically, people feel like it's because the Magyars have very weak siege and they don't have the strong economy bonus and whatnot, that they've just been feeling a little bit underwhelming as a civilization recently. This was surprising to me initially, because when the Forgotten expansion was released, the Magyars were widely considered to be the strongest Forgotten civilization, and really like the only competitive one. They were actually considered to be quite good, and if we go back to seeing tournament games from around that time, the Magyars were really one of the only new civilizations that ever really saw play. And they did see play. They were a good civilization. So why are they not good now? The weaknesses that we gave them initially were to try and offset a lot of their strengths, because they have a very broad tech tree. The Magyars have some excellent units, some excellent bonuses. The Magyar Hussar is such a strong trash unit. It's a Hussar with an attack bonus versus siege weapons. That's so very useful. Poor Purple will get denied. They have such a broad tech tree. You could easily draw comparisons to the Huns, but the thing is though, if you do that, the Huns have such a narrow tech tree. It's really only cavalry units, whereas the Magyars get everything, except a good siege and a good economy bonus. So why are they bad now? And I would say that if the Magyars are indeed weak, it is because I believe that all of the other civilizations have gotten significant buffs across the board, whereas the Magyars have received none. We look at the Indians as a civilization that was classically considered to be not so good, and now they're considered to be quite good. And again, I attribute a lot of this to the broad range of buffs that all of the civilizations that needed them have received over the years, that really brought them up to snuff. Do I feel like the Magyars are as weak as community sentiment would imply? No, I feel like the Magyars as a civilization are actually definitely decent, and that it's okay for civilizations to have pronounced weaknesses provided that they have pronounced strengths, which the Magyars I feel like they do. That being said, it's certainly possible that the Magyars are indeed a little bit weak and they need some love. So even if I feel like the Magyars aren't like a terrible civilization or anything along those lines, that doesn't mean that we're not going to buff them. Oh god, Grant just accidentally reset them by accident, and he's looking to kill some of those red units. By the way, he's in deep trouble among the Teal switches alliances, because these heavy camels will chew right through these. They will cut through these war wagons like a knife through butter, so he's gonna have to be careful. That's the hard counter army here. Great to see Teal having the hard counters positioned here as a failsafe and as a counter. So Magyars could certainly get a buff in an upcoming balance patch. I could really see that happening. We always encourage players to keep an open mind and experiment because civs are going to be weaker or stronger depending on the map all the time. So that's just going to vary. Maybe the Magyars do need a little bit of love, so they could certainly receive that in an upcoming patch, yes. Jedi Key asks, how about giving the Magyars fully upgraded champions? I'm not exactly sure what the Magyars would need. And balance, like I keep saying, it's a really, really complex process. So we always encourage players to keep an open mind there, especially with suggestions, because most ideas that sound really, really good on paper, the longer you think about them, the worse they sound. But we always look to community ideas for various things like what should we do about Arquebus, and we decided to just remove from the speed bonus that it gave to Bombard cannons, Bombard towers, so we can still micro against them, add a little bit of counterplay. I would like to give siege engineers to the Magyars, for example, personally. I feel like that's something that would really round them out as a civilization, make them feel so much nicer. But the question is does that address the problems of them being a civilization? Like, where the balance problems lie? Is it the lack of eco bonus? Is it their crappy siege? Does giving them siege engineers really address that? Do we want to keep their weaknesses the same? Do we want to buff their strengths? Or do we want to smooth out some of their weaknesses? And there are many, many, many ways to go about that from a balance standpoint, so it's something that we'll have to consider, and I'm sure we will discuss that internally very soon. In terms of unit and civilization ideas, those, I know people are really, really excited about them, but those can be very tricky for us too. I mean, basically, I will look at them and I can tell you that I really, really love the ideas, but I don't want people to get attached to the idea that even if I think they're really cool, that they will actually happen. Forgotten Empires is like a team that does all that sort of stuff, but of course I can forward them ideas, but in general they already have their plans for the future. Look at all these Korean keeps. I will check out your unit idea, though, of course, JFK today. A lot of people just ask about that because they want to see whether or not it's a cool idea, regardless of whether or not they feel like it's going to be implemented. So JFK asks, hey, Rez, how about a naked Fanatic unit? Hear me out. All right, man. An infantry unit that deals a lot of damage at decent HP, but no armor. So more of a practical Castle Age unit, very situational late game, more prevalent in the mid game. So I feel like that overlaps a bit with the Shoto Warrior as a unit. And one of the things that's really hard from a design/balance standpoint is how much design space do we truly have left in Age of Empires 2? And the answer is I don't think too much. While I have no idea what the actual future plans are, it's just I feel like if we were gonna make another expansion, there can't possibly be room for more than maybe just one more. If that ever actually happened. Because design space is certainly limited, and at this point, we'd be hard-pressed to find economy bonuses, unit ideas that feel unique, satisfying, and fun to the player that don't overlap with each other, because we really do want to make sure that things feel unique. I do think there is certainly design space left over, but designing civilizations and units is a lot harder now than it used to be. Like, the Shoto Warrior is kind of our quintessential Castle Age glass cannon unit, very high attack, very low armor. It's not naked, but it certainly is a huge drain on your economy from a gold standpoint if your opponent only has, some archers and whatnot. He will certainly be able to deal with that quite nicely, I think. And it'll be just a big drain. I do think it's a cool idea, though, and to prove it's a cool idea, I think we have a similar unit in the game already. Yeah, if we buff, for example, like the Magyars, discount on scouts, we have to consider, how does that feel if we compare it to, the Berbers, and I guess since it applies to Feudal Age, it can be a little bit different. Maybe we made it like a 15%, 20%, 25%. There are a lot of options on the table. If the Malians are too good, how do we nerf them? Cision has been very clear that he wants to keep the feeling of bonuses impactful and easy to understand. So, for example, if we ever did nerf the Malians, he wouldn't want to remove something like the gold shaft mining upgrade from their free gold mining upgrades and just give them just free, removing gold mining and giving them just free gold shaft mining, because that makes the bonus a little harder to understand and it makes it feel less impactful. So we'd probably have to nerf it in other areas, maybe their percentage on the buildings discount. Great, 40 years remaining. Here's the problem, though. He has no actual units here, so this is so unfortunate for him. He's so close to winning the game. He's got everything he needs. He's got all these towers, but he doesn't have units, and towers alone will not suffice. As soon as this villager goes down, timer will switch over to red and then immediately back to teal. All these Bombard towers here to protect him are going to really bite him right now, as he's going to lose all of his towers, so much stone down the drain, and now blue poised to take the middle with this large army if he wants to, but he's sustaining a lot of damage. This is why these Korean towers can be so very snazzy. We're also looking to, like, feedback. You know, for example, like, how do the Portuguese feel after all the nerfs? Personally, I would be very concerned that the Portuguese, like Arquebus, doesn't feel like it's an impactful technology now that it's not hideously broken. And I wonder if it makes sense to put a little bit more power back into that in ways that are easier to balance rather than things like that are impossible to balance, like the faster Bombard cannon projectile speed. Maybe we make the hand cannon projectile just a little bit faster to undo one of the initial nerfs to it. Maybe that would be fine. Or maybe the Portuguese are fine, as is. Well, yeah. Balance has to be looked at from multiple perspectives, you know. Like, the Feitoria right now is certainly not as cost-efficient as a villager, as a group of villagers is, but it has plenty of advantages, like it provides you access to resources that you otherwise wouldn't have, as John Fist mentioned in one of the previous videos we did. It is something that you can just build up as part of your economy a lot quicker. It's also harder to raid. You have various things like that. You contribute those resources to your teammates. So balance is certainly a complex mistress, and one that I find myself just being eternally obsessed with. So when I look at new civilizations, I look at them less from a historical standpoint because it's not my forte, and Forgotten Empires is very, very specialized individuals that really know that stuff better than I do. I love the numbers. I love the balance. How do you create fun, interesting gameplay? And it's nice to have a really strong historical template for that to work with. Cision, of course, is the mastermind behind all final design and balance decisions, and I feel like he really understands the feel of the game. So. Welcome to stream, Beast5556. Great to have you, my friend. Welcome to the live stream. We hope to see you in the future. Oh, Teal, with quite a strong showing in the middle of the map. He has some siege rams here, which are great to do in a free-for-all King of the Hill game because these are quite difficult to remove. And at the end of the day, all you need are some units that survive when the timer hits 0. So, Purple moving in with some skirms, taking a lot of damage from these castles. Now he's switching to enemy, but these skirms are really not going to do anything here. And I think it's just due to a lack of gold. This poor fellow does not have that much resources to spend. He's also the Teuton, so they're not that great from an upgrade standpoint. Portuguese seem fine to me now. Yeah, perhaps they are indeed fine. We're always monitoring that stuff. Always. Conquerors says, hi, don't you think the Bombard towers deal splash damage to small groups? Groups of small units like Arbalest, especially when actually suffer when they take shots. So Togaraga, that's a great example of historical accuracy slash, I guess, like, actual logic, like the game making sense from a physical standpoint to balance. I would say that, for example, this is why the Chinese doesn't have things like bombard cannons and hand cannons, is even though that would kind of make sense historically, from a balance standpoint, we're worried that could be too much. As there's that already has quite a powerful push. And we look at Bombard Towers. Bombard Towers are a unit that is so very strong, particularly before, I believe, 1.0C, where siege rams now only take 1 damage from them. Bombard Towers, they do see plenty of competitive play, as it means just hold on to some land. And even though it makes sense that the cannonball would not only be faster, but it would also just deal area of effect damage, that would probably be too strong. Bombard Towers, we think, are already just A-okay. Welcome to the chat, Cision. Great to have you as always. So hopefully that makes sense. Bombard Towers, yeah, it would make sense to do that, but from a balance standpoint, we think that that could be quite the dangerous change. But, you know, we'll make changes as necessary. If for some reason Bombard Towers turn out to suck, we would be more than happy to do that, but I would be hesitant. So, Blue gonna occupy the middle. I wonder how Elite Organ Guns feel after the changes. Giving them a little bit of minimum range. We hopefully, the goal there is to open up some counterplay to them, to give them a way not only to differentiate them from just hand cannoneers and whatnot, but also to make it so they are more counterable by heavy cavalry while still maintaining some sick raw stats. 2+6 is nothing to sneeze at for sure. We're 92 years remaining. Blue is a very strong showing in the middle with a couple of Bombard Towers, but he is missing Fletching, Bodkinero, and Bracer, which you will need for those Bombard Towers. And, well, here comes the Berserks from Yoshinot Pass, missing quite a few upgrades. Poor Orange just needs to focus on building up his economy right about now. It's great. I'm really glad that these players haven't actually killed him yet, because, again, you want him on your team. It's very, very valuable to have even just a small amount of additional bodies in the field. He's not threatening to win the game anytime soon, so you definitely want him on your team. JJ2 asks, hey mate, you made me play Aoe2 HD again. Well, thank you so much, JJ, he says. But I play on a very poor level and love your tutorials and love you and the devs put into this game. Great community. Thank you so much, JJ. That makes all the time that I put in, all the work I put in worthwhile. Thank you, thank you. Really no worries about whatever level of play you play at. All that matters to me is that you're having fun. And that's why we put so much time and love into all the expansions and why I spend so much time streaming, making YouTube videos and tutorials. Because my thing is I want players to be able to just jump into this game and enjoy it and have as much fun as I do. So it doesn't matter what level of play you are as long as you're comfortable with it. JFK asks, can you make a redone William Wallace campaign? So we're a little hesitant to do things like redo old campaigns because, again, we have a legacy to carry and we want to make sure that the game feels like it always has. That being said, I mean, making like campaigns, new campaigns for old civilizations or making like a new tutorial campaign isn't out of the question. So never say never, but no plans for presents. Could maybe happen. Rock says Bombard towers move so slowly, and they miss things like massed halbs and arbs, and even when they do get hit, only one dies, and then all 120 damage is wasted on a single unit. So this is an example of, and it's something I mentioned earlier, is that I always want people to really carry an open mind with balance. It's extremely important, because balance is not something where you should just look at a unit, draw a conclusion, and then lock yourself out of all feedback. Balance is a complicated process, and there I think you'll find that very few players would agree with that analysis on Bombard towers, and we need to acknowledge that that is just the case. Why is that true? Why are Bombard towers so strong if they seem to overkill a lot of units? The answer is that more often than not, you're not in a situation where you can actually easily juke those shots. And even if you do, the overkill, even if it's an overkill, that's still amazing compared to a keep. Bombard towers are not that much more expensive. The fact that they overkill a unit, it's amazing if they like one-shot an enemy bombard cannon or something like that. But if they don't and they're just killing halbs, that's still great. These things are very difficult to remove. It just gives you a slow, incremental edge, and they can really only be removed safely with siege weapons. If you think about it from a resource standpoint, every single time they kill a unit, compare that to the cost that you spent on that Bombard tower and the time that you spent building it. More often than not, it trades very, very efficiently. Yes, if your opponent has nothing but garbage units, maybe the Bombard tower is less efficient. But this building is insane. It sees a lot of competitive play. It's very, very strong. Wow, blue completely nice. He just decimated that battle. It's great to see. So, again, we really, like, the only thing that can stop players from growing as a player is themselves. You will never stop getting better at Age of Empires 2. Your understanding will never stop as long as you continually open yourself up to opposing ideas, and you never feel like you're too sure of anything. There are multiple times where we have had an idea and we've had to dial back on it at Forgotten Empires. And there are multiple times where we've had great ideas and we've been super happy with how they turn out. So the important thing is just, always make sure that you're, they don't feel like that you know everything. Sometimes you just make a lot of really well-educated guesses. That's why I'm always leaving myself open to the idea of maybe there's some things I just don't understand. I think you made a really good point on Bombard towers, and it's not immediately obvious why this thing is so strong. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. It certainly isn't immediately obvious. Wow, blue could be in a position to win this game. Very nice. And this is the thing where it would be much easier for me to demonstrate if he's missing Bracer. If he had Bracer, this would be even better. If I could show the individual kill counts on units, like these Bombard towers, I assure you, have paid for themselves. They've also drawn some fire from these Bombard cannons. But I do think that's a great question, even though some of you in the chat and on YouTube might disagree, and it might be obvious to you. That's why I take the time to do these streams and answer all these questions, because at a glance, it's not immediately obvious why Bombard towers are as good as they are. GG, well played. What a great game here from blue. I think you will be able to do it. I really think that we do not want Bombard towers being any better than they are, Tokaraka. So I really encourage you to keep an open mind with Bombard towers. If you ask around and you don't shut yourself out from that, and you always just keep talking to people, asking questions, and not being too sure of it, I think it would help. Because I think in a world where Bombard towers, personally, are any better versus rams is a scary world. Especially where their projectile speed is faster and deal splash damage. That sounds incredibly scary to me. This is very, very scary. So I'd be a little bit concerned about that. I mean, maybe if you made murder holes not affected, that would maybe be okay, but I think more often than not, we find that Bombard Towers are strongest in a situation where it's suboptimal for your opponent to focus fire them down, but rather they're fighting in a battle, and the Bombard Tower is just the elephant in the room, or in this case, the tower in the room, that's doing all this free damage from a distance, and your opponent can't afford to waste all that damage killing a Bombard Tower. You know, if you have a bunch of Auditors and you have a bunch of units, if your opponent wants to use his Bombard Cannon shots to blow up your Bombard Tower, he's not dealing any damage to your army, and then he just gets wiped. Otherwise, the Bombard Tower is doing all the free damage. And that's why I feel like making murder holes not affect them wouldn't necessarily make that balanced. But, you know, we never know. It's something that I'm always open to. Okay, so it seems that wall at the start was the right strat after all. Take that, Twitch and YouTube. Xgear wins again. Seriously, this is such a great game played by all players in this game. Major props to Heisenberg for keeping his cool, carrying on, and I think he played a great game. He really did apply a lot of pressure. He was focusing on the middle. All these players did great, and I really feel like Xgear just earned this one, so this was just an excellent game. Yeah. Cision currently has no plans to make changes to Bombard Towers. As with most things, the answer is for future content / features is the no plans are present, but never say never. Okay, video says, what instead of nerfing arquebus, the Portuguese lost siege engineers? This is very interesting, and I think that's something that we've considered, but we feel like we want to open up more counterplay is the general idea. And the problem with the Bombard cannons and Bombard towers being so much faster with their projectile speed is that generally the counterplay was that, like, you juke the shots with your own Bombard cannons. And we just weren't able to do that anymore. And we found that it's so very hard to get that value correct that we just ended up taking it out. If we remove siege engineers, but we keep the speed the same, this is a great, great question game video, we run into a world where the Portuguese, they feel a little bit weaker at what they do, which is this really excellent gunpowder siege push, which we want them to feel good at. It's that fantasy that we want players to feel like their various medieval fantasy archetypes are being fulfilled here. Your giant army of Longwomen, your huge Korean death ball, your mass Frankish paladins, your Teutonic knights are invincible. We want players to be able to fulfill those. So with the Portuguese, we feel like that'd be taking away from something where it's one of their defining strengths, and at the same time not opening up that much counterplay. It weakens them a bit for sure, having one less range, and they push slower, but you still can't juke those shots. So I think it's a great idea, and it's something that we considered, but personally I'm a little bit more happier with the arquebus change that we ended up going for, but it's certainly a good thought, yeah. You also be a little careful with the advertising. Togoraka, I encourage you to ask people, and if everyone tells you that the Bombard Towers are very strong, as is, then I assure you, they're very, very strong. I know you're very attached to it, though. Yo, be nice, Xgear. See, Heisenberg was instrumental, though, in that case, and that's why it's important to be his ally. This is a great, great game. Sinistro Jr. asks, what are your thoughts about the Siege Tower? I love the unit, but it feels like it needs some love. Maybe let it go over 2 walls. So changes like that, like letting it go over 2 walls, I imagine would be somewhat of an obstacle from an engineering standpoint, but maybe it would be fine. We always have to consider engineering aspects, like, you know, are we going to add a Death Star that shoots a giant laser across the map? No on many levels. The Siege Tower as a unit, I'd be hesitant to buff it too much. I hope that that's something that we're extra careful on, because it's a unit that, if it was too strong, it would really... the point of the Siege Tower, like with all balance changes that we do, is opening up a wider variety of options for players, feeling like they have more strategies. And on Arena, we're hoping that it's the type of unit where it encourages players to look at Arena differently, and maybe they'll use the Siege Tower to drop some units in the opposing base, catch them off guard. If the Siege Tower is too strong, that's all players will do, ever. And it may feel oppressive and frustrating to play against, so we have to be very careful with that. Do the Siege Towers need additional buffs? We'll see, and that's something that we'll be continuing to monitor, but I think that the Siege Tower is the type of unit where you gotta be really, really careful with it. We don't want to create a metagame where Arena just is super frustrating. It's just nothing but Siege Towers. We want players to be able to play Arena like they always have been, but just with more options at their disposal. That's, of course, the idea as well with like the change to the Aztecs, where their military creation speed bonus no longer applies to monks, is that the monks themselves for the Aztecs are still good. You still get to fulfill that fantasy. But they're just a little bit weaker, but still viable. That's the thing. They should be viable and strong. Yeah. So we don't want the siege tower, I think, to be too crazy. But we'd be happy to make some balance changes to it if need be. But that's the type of thing, man, where I think it's important to be hesitant with the siege tower. That thing is it's deadly. Siege tower to run over villagers. That would be funny. That would be funny. Yeah, if the siege tower is too strong as a wax, I imagine people will palisade behind stone walls. But is that fun gameplay? We'll see. I feel like the siege tower actually, ever since it got the cost reduction of 100 wood, which is huge, is actually pretty solid. So maybe it is in a decent spot. Making siege tower shoot arrows is a decent thought, but I also imagine that would be difficult to balance. Who knows? Who knows? Your guys' feedback, very valuable. Hope you guys enjoyed this game as well as our the commentary and whatnot. Hopefully I did a good job answering questions and just really making everyone here feel involved with the balance/design process. I mean, yeah, Rams are a massive counter to Bombard towers, but they need to be. They absolutely need to be. Because otherwise, we found in the original 1.0b, and I use the term "we" here loosely because I was not involved at all with Ensemble Studios. I'm speaking from a design development standpoint, is that was a metagame that no one wanted to live in, where not every civilization has access to Bombard cannons, and having only Trebs as an answer to that can be quite clunky. I think we really need siege rams as a hard counter there. You need hard counters like that to make Bombard towers not so strong. And yet, the thing we have to consider is that even though that is a hard counter, you're right, dealing only 1 damage, that is a huge waste of Bombard tower shot. That's a hard counter, textbook definition. Bombard towers still see so much consistent competitive play, despite that. So I think that speaks strongly of their strengths, because every civilization has rams. And that's a hard counter, and yet they're still good. And what I really like about that is that the player who's building Bombard towers has so much counterplay to the rams coming in. Counterplay is one of my favorite words, and just the development design concepts in general. Is that as the siege rams move in, you have so many opportunities to remove them with other units. This means that now you have to make something else besides nothing but Bombard towers. Maybe you're going to swoop in with some cavalry, maybe some onagers at the back. It creates such an interesting back and forth dynamic between both players, poking at each other, exchanging units. I think it creates a really great dynamic. 1.0 view is the best ever invincible tower, says Johnny Jellyfish. Spooky stuff. Spooky stuff. My thing is that I always go around, and I try not to have too much is to be ever like really too sure of myself. So that's why I like to just go around and surround myself with so much feedback. I'm always learning. I have very few like super strong opinions on things. Like I love the idea of counterplay, but I'm always open to the idea of what civs are good, what civs are bad, and why, what kind of changes we should do. And I think that keeping an open mind like that is what allows you to continue growing as a player and a person. So, yeah. Balance is a complex thing. Infinite tower reseeding. Scout Goat, my man. You understand me. Oh, that'd be so funny. And it says, but Rez, can we have a Great America as a civ? Coming to save, to save the day? I mean, I think it'd be interesting to have like an Iroquois civ. Doesn't mean we'll ever do it. Because it kind of overlaps with Aoe2 and whatnot. But no, I don't think we can have like a modern day America. That would be so much fun, though. Maybe we have a Teddy Roosevelt that shoots lasers out of his eyes as a cheat unit. George Washington with a giant axe. It does look really weird that the Bombard towers are certainly hilariously unrealistic. Same thing with the cannon galleons. You've seen the cannonball move so slowly, but balance. This is something that the original Ensemble Studios devs always said, and this is our priority too at Forgotten Empire, is that balance is more important than realism. The game needs to be fun rather than realistic. If we wanted the game to be realistic, I always joke about how it'd be great to have you know, a World War I RTS game that is completely 100% historically accurate and everyone just gets trench foot and dies. Civil War game where everyone just disease kills almost everybody. So yeah, I know it looks weird, but it's important to keeping the game fun. Yeah, we can put in George Crushington. Oh yes, please. Welcome to stream, Russell Bra. So that was a fun one. I think we can do one more after this, I guess. Otherwise, the stream would be too short. But I thought that was an excellent game, and we really hope that you enjoyed my commentary and everything. We will post that on the respective channels, and encourage you to follow our social media pages. That is facebook.com/ was it Forgotten Empires Games? Forgotten.empires.games. And then we have Twitter, Forgotten Imp. All that stuff on the screen, or in the video description below, or on Twitch. We also have various design articles we post on ForgottenEmpires.net. Thank you so much for supporting the developers of the game, and for just enjoying our favorite game too. We're all huge fans of the franchise. We will be right back in approximately 1 to 2 minutes with the next game of the live stream before my voice gives out. So, stay tuned, stay tuned.